In this session, I'll be taking about the proteins, definition and classification. The objectives of the session are, at the end of the session, the learner shall be able to define proteins and various bases of classification of proteins. And in this session, we'll be taking up the classification of proteins based on functional aspects. Now let us define proteins. Definition of proteins. Proteins are macromolecules, okay, so composed of one or more polypeptide chains, and each chain is composed of different L-alpha amino acids. This is how we define proteins. Different polypeptides contains different sequence of amino acids. Now, the next objective is basis of classification. The basis of classification. Okay, different bases can be taken to classify the proteins. What are these various bases? Okay, proteins can be classified taking the basis of functions. That is the one aspect, functional aspects. Then the composition, what they contain. Third one is molecular shape, and next one is the nutritional quality. Quality. So based on this one, proteins can be classified. In this session, we will take up classification based on functions. Okay. So proteins have most diverse functions. Okay. Their diverse functions are delivered by the proteins. Let us take up one by one. Okay. The first one is catalytic proteins. Catalytic proteins, or they can be called as enzymes. The catalytic proteins are called as enzymes. In the presence of enzymes, rate of biological reaction increases. So there are various metabolic processes are there. Without enzymes, we cannot imagine various metabolic processes. Okay, whether it is digestion, absorption, or other various metabolic pathways. So the enzymes are glucokinase and dehydrogenases, or many enzymes are there. These enzymes facilitate the various metabolic pathways. The second one is transport proteins. Having the transport functions. So carry specific molecules. Some proteins carry specific molecules. Proteins known as transport proteins, they carry the specific molecules or ions. So from one organ to another organ. Okay. So can we have the examples? Yes, definitely. So hemoglobin carries oxygen, carbon dioxide. Apolipoproteins. So they carry lipids. Various lipids they carry. Membrane transport proteins. membrane. So, okay, many membrane transport proteins are there. Okay, transferrin. What it carries? Transferrin. Transferrin. So, transports iron. Very important protein. Then, celluloplasmin. Another transport protein. Celluloplasmin. The celluloplasmin transports copper. Okay. So these are various transport proteins are present. Various transport proteins are present. The next one is, okay, storage protein. Some proteins, so they function as a storage proteins. Okay, they store some molecules. Okay, serve as a storage form of essential components. What are these? Apoferritin. What apoferritin stores? It stores iron. Then we know the myoglobin. The myoglobin so stores oxygen in muscles. Oxygen in muscles. Okay. So hemoglobin transports, so myoglobin stores. Okay. Both are heme proteins. Both are heme proteins. Then next one is contractile proteins. They carry out the contract function. Contractile, okay, proteins. They carry the contract function. So ability to contract. These proteins have the ability to contract. Suppose, and function. So like in skeletal muscle. Okay. What are these proteins? Example, actin and myosin. Actin and myosin. So this is contractile proteins. Next is, let us go to the next function. The basis of the proteins. Function, next function, that is structural. Some proteins play very important structural role. So serve as supporting, okay, filaments or sheet. Supporting filaments or sheet to give a biological structure. What are these? Collagen. The abundant amount, it is present in connective tissue. Elastin, in ligaments, in other places, it is present. Okay, elastin and keratin. Hair and nails, the keratin is present. Okay, structural proteins, serve as supporting filaments or sheet to give biological structure. Then the next one is defense proteins. They defend. They carry out the defense function. So what are these? Defense proteins. Defense proteins defend against invasion of foreign substances, including the bacteria, foreign substances, any foreign agent, bacteria, virus, and so and so. Okay, then these are immunoglobulins. The examples are immunoglobulins. Also, we can also include fibrinogen, and thrombin can be included in this category because so they are blood clotting proteins. They prevent the loss of blood clotting proteins. Okay, the next one is regulatory proteins. They regulate the various metabolic reactions. If the regulation is proper, that is the physiology. If the regulation is disturbed, that is pathology. Okay, regulate cellular or physiological functions. We know the functions of hormones. Okay, like and neurotransmitters. neurotransmitters. So these proteins recognize hormones and neurotransmitters. Okay, then, so let us take some examples in this category. The examples in this category, they regulate blood sugar, blood glucose. Okay, then growth hormone. Growth hormone, it stimulates growth and cell division. In this category, there are some growth factors are there. Can we have the examples? Yes. PDGF, platelet derived growth factor, and EGF, epidermal growth factor. They control cell division. Okay, and also differentiation. The next basis is stress response proteins. Okay, so what they do? So there are variety of abiotic stresses are there by the non-living material. Okay, this is mediated by, this one is mediated by certain proteins. Okay, then, so the examples are cytochrome P450. What it does, it converts toxic substances into less toxic. Then the metallothioneins are there. They are cysteine-rich proteins. Cysteine-rich intracellular proteins. What they do, these metallothioneins. Okay, so what happens? They bind cadmium like metals. Okay, mercury, silver like heavy metals, and they are toxic, and they remove those metals. Due to that one, the toxicity will be decreased. Next, the final one is heat shock proteins. So these heat shock proteins are produced by cells in response to exposure to heat, cold, like extreme conditions like UV light. So they are called heat shock proteins. So it happens during wound healing or tissue remodeling. They also perform function as chaperones. So these are various bases of classification of the proteins. In this session, we have discussed about proteins, definition and classification. Let us summarize. Definition of the proteins. Proteins are one or more polypeptide chains with same or different L-alpha amino acids containing macromolecules. There are many number of amino acids are there. The basis of classification. So the basis of classification, we can take functions of the proteins as one basis, composition and molecular shape and nutritional quality. Let us take up one by one. In this session, we will classify proteins based on the functions. The first one is catalytic proteins are enzymes. So those enzymes, so they carry out the catalytic reactions. Okay, increase the activity of the particular reaction. The examples are glucokinase and dehydrogenase, or many enzymes are there. The second one is transport proteins. Those proteins who are involved in the transport function. Hemoglobin in the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Transferrin transfers iron. Ceruloplasmin, copper. Apolipoproteins, various lipids. The next one is storage proteins. They are apoferritin, which stores iron, and myoglobin, which stores oxygen in the muscles. Okay, then contractile proteins. So very important proteins in the muscles. So they are actin and myosin. Then structural proteins, the connective tissue. So they provide the structure. They contains the many important proteins like collagen, elastin, elasticity is provided, keratin, which is present in the nail, hairs and skin. Okay, then defense proteins, they defend against the foreign agents. So they are immunoglobulins. We can say it's exactly not defending against the foreign agents. Suppose if you take fibrinogen, thrombin, they can also be included in this class. So because they prevent the loss of the blood, okay, by clotting, by involving themselves in the clotting mechanism. Okay, then regulatory proteins. So there are hormones and neurotransmitters are there. At the membrane, there are cell receptors are there. They are the proteins. So they control the function of these hormones through which many other functions are delivered. Okay, there are many hormonal proteins are there which is involved in the various regulatory activity. Insulin and glucagon. So they control the blood glucose levels. Growth hormone, they are involved in the control of the growth. And growth factors, the platelet derived growth factor and epidermal growth factor, so they are involved in the cell division and differentiations. The stress response proteins are, some proteins are synthesized when exposed to the stress. That is the reason they are called stress response proteins. The examples are, so cytochrome P450, which converts the more toxic into the less toxic substances. Metallothioneins, they decrease the toxicity by binding with the heavy metals such as mercury, silver and cadmium. Then next one is heat shock proteins. Some proteins are produced when a person is exposed to the extreme heat, cold, UV rays. Generally, this process takes place during wound healing or tissue remodeling. Also, they also function as chaperones. So chaperones are such proteins which assist the other proteins. So various structural changes. Okay, structural modifications, folding like that. Okay, so these are the various classes, subclasses of proteins which are classified on the basis of various functions. Okay, thank you very much.